Es gibt nur zwei Dinge, die Lehre und das Gesegnete. Und das Gesegnete. I see. So, these are words of Gottfried Benn in the 1950s when Heidegger was reading him. And Heidegger would have said nichts, signaling this division between, in a certain way, what we consider to be our business as human beings, what we know about, and what is none of our business. In other words, this dizzying abyss, or the niche that niche-tates. But of course, since we have the nothing before us, just as the newer didn't have the concept of time, according to Evan Spritzer, before them, although they were in some way discussing it, because they would say things like, around the time so-and-so was eaten by the rhinoceros, this happened. So it's like the specific conjointure of things doesn't necessarily have to be brought into question as the Seinfrage for this remembrance or Denken to be trying to take direction. We have an occasion, Gottfried Benn in the poem, he juxtaposes this nothing with something that he's saying is scared, in the sense of scared quarry, scared run off into the forest. The dog barked, brushed off the scared quarry. But also the marked, in the sense of marked, like Cain, and this Zweidinge, the two things are the marked thing, the symbol. Man has become a symbol to himself, and the abyss, or the niche tate, the nothing that nothings, as Heidegger finds it. This is one dramatic way of looking at the same thing as we get in set theory. One dramatic way of looking at the same thing we get in discovering that Kant's system is like, because it must be known, and then there must be sort of like a university departments that teach it, and it has to be institutionalized at some level. It's a kind of what is it? Schaffen. It's kind of self-schaffen, or self-making, or self-creation, of the kind that the Germans were obsessed with in the 19th century, and which has expression in the von Humboldt notion of the education as this self-forming, where they have in mind sort of this forming of the spiritual self on a, how should one say? So like there's a split of the meaning of the word culture, and then the Germans stigmatize it as French civilization, Germans Kultur, as in Kulturkampf later on. And the question is, and the Kultur becomes more and more like this Nietzschean sense of all the forms, of the spiritual forms one can cultivate oneself to. The original meaning is cultivation, agriculture, a field cultivated is built up, it's edified, to use the Latin. So the thing built up spiritually is one dimension, artistically, intellectually, ethically, in the various dimensions, as in the the famous book by Goethe, the book about the the sentimental education. So, I mean, that's a forerunner of this type of notion in contradistinction to Christianity, which is viewed gratefully as a forerunner to this vision now of the selbst schaffen, or the selbst shaping or forming. And then this is seen as against French manners and whatever it is the French are good at, and the way they've shaped themselves, and that's called civilization. And then there's all these, there's this series of wars, at least, and going back farther before the Franco-Prussian War. So we have a kind of decisive unmooring of things, which is what Heidegger wants to somehow bring into Wissenschaft, but all the time on the awareness that the immediate situation is still involved, and that anything, even Kant's theory, but also especially the notion of a unification, which is identical to the notion of a university department at Fusus, or of Historia of History. Remember that really these fields were never professional cohorts. They were never university departments before the 19th century, especially with history, but I think also many of the great physicists and astronomers were they were not part of university departments. They were people doing things as part of a general sort of intellectual pan-European sort of thing from the time that when Latin was the language of the scholars in modernity. There's many different ways we could use to get some orientation to what motivates Heidegger's problem, but I think seeing what he's talking about, it's sort of like there's a lot of abstract arguments that we see are true, but we don't we haven't really taken in and noticed. Somehow we haven't, the apperception hasn't been completed. And then if you take apperception on analogy with the midwifery of Socrates as this attempt to remember the things from before we were born, or the thing that the soul has eternally, not before the soul was born, but as I was corrected for making that mistake at one time, not before the soul was born, but before we were born, the things that the soul had in them eternally. I think this is thought, even though in a way Socrates was questionable whether he believes what he's saying in the way he's saying it, because he seems to think that these things are got to through dialectic or discussion. But we have that version of something that's like recollection, like the simple act of recollection. And it's also sort of like thinking writ large, that we could still see active in Heidegger's Was heißt Denken, right? So in this sense, that's why I've been saying sort of recently, there is Yeah, in Heidegger, see, unlike Nietzsche, there's this special sort of remaining, this kind of special rudder that says we're staying with certain problems, such as those coming issuing sort of from Parmenides, and we're still in contact with these first thinkers, and we're still, um, in a way, yeah, we're still undergoing this logic, this dialogue, this mass polyphonic dialogic um, concert of Vienna or whatever. We're reclining in it. We're trying to keep open the possibility of what got called from one perspective, from the perspective of classical scholarship, humanism. I think it's totally different. The perspective of Steven Pinker is more like what we're talking about when we're talking about the contrast between French civilization and German culture. When this sort of Spaltung, if you like, is made, then you get more, the possibility of, cognizing things closer to the way that they're, somehow that split still has some power, I think. So maybe that's one more point of investigation.